If you grew up in the 1960s, your brain was shaped by uncertainty, change, and responsibility in ways modern childhood never replicates. There is something truly distinct about the people who grew up in the 1960s. You might see it in the way they stay remarkably steady when a crisis hits, or how they navigate complete uncertainty with a calm that feels almost eerie to others. Maybe it's that specific blend of being a dreamer and a realist at the same time, a trait that seems hardwired into your very being. You see, the 1960s didn't just shape a generation. They built a very specific kind of psychological architecture. In this video, we are going to look at why growing up in that decade created some of the most complex and resilient people on the planet today. Let's look at a part of a 1960s childhood that shaped the mind in a way most people never talk about. Picture yourself as a 6-year-old. Every single morning at school, you and your classmates practice something called duck and cover drills. The teacher blows a whistle. You immediately crawl under your wooden desk. You tuck your head between your knees, trying to shield yourself from the idea of a nuclear blast. Even as a young child, you understood enough. You knew that somewhere out there, adults had weapons that could end the world. You knew the life your parents built for you could vanish in a single flash of light. And deep down, you probably suspected that a wooden desk wouldn't really save you. This wasn't trauma in the way we usually define it today. It was something much more subtle. You learned how to hold two completely opposite truths at the same time. The world could end tomorrow, but you still had to finish your homework tonight. Psychologists call this productive cognitive dissonance, but for you, it was just a regular Tuesday. Instead of creating a generation of paralyzed adults, this constant awareness of danger produced something unexpected. People who have a very unusual relationship with uncertainty. When you've practiced for the apocalypse before your 7th birthday, the small problems of everyday life lose their power to terrify you. If you lose a job, at least it isn't nuclear war. If a relationship ends, the world is still standing. You learned early on that worrying about things you can't control is just a waste of energy. This generation developed a sophisticated form of psychological triage. You learned how to sort problems into what you can influence and what you simply have to accept. You didn't get this from a book. You absorbed it through your skin during those school drills. Now, let's talk about a Sunday night in February 1964. You're sitting in your living room, the whole family gathered around the TV, and 4 young men from Liverpool appear on The Ed Sullivan Show. The screaming from the crowd is so loud you can barely hear the music. Your parents look a little alarmed. Your older sister is likely in tears. But you? You were witnessing a cultural earthquake. The Beatles didn't just change the charts. They proved to an entire generation that the world could transform in a single night. They showed you that what seemed permanent and fixed could become obsolete in the span of one broadcast. This lesson went far deeper than music or haircuts. You learned that change doesn't always happen slowly over decades. It can happen right now. This is why, as an adult, you aren't easily threatened by disruption. You've seen entire cultural landscapes shift beneath your feet, and you survived. You know that what's revolutionary today will be normal tomorrow, and what feels permanent today might be gone by next year. But there was a psychological twist to all this change. While you saw radical progress, you also lived through a series of devastating assassinations. JFK, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, all gone within 5 years. You watched your heroes fall on live television. You learned that progress isn't a straight line, and that hope and tragedy often share the same room. This combination of optimism and repeated loss created a very specific psychological profile. You believe change is possible, but you aren't naive about the cost. You can hope without being foolish. This isn't cynicism, it's hard-earned wisdom. Let's look at something personal. Imagine you're 8 years old. Your mother hands you a few coins and sends you to the corner store all by yourself. You walk there alone. You pick out what you want. You hand over the money. You count your own change before walking home. This wasn't a special privilege. It was just how life worked. Children in the 60s handled real, physical money. Not digital numbers, not plastic cards, but coins that had weight in your pocket. You learned that money was finite because you could literally see it disappearing from your hand. This physical relationship with currency built neural pathways that modern children often don't develop. You understood cause and effect in a very visceral way. If you spend these coins on candy now, they are gone. There was no abstract screen to hide the reality of the transaction. What researchers now call financial executive function was being built into you through daily experience. You weren't just learning about money, you were feeling it. And the independence didn't stop at the store. Think about your walk to school. You were 6 or 7 years old, books tucked under your arm, navigating the neighborhood with no parent in sight. You knew which houses had mean dogs and which neighbors were friendly. Neuroscientists have found that this kind of autonomous navigation in childhood develops spatial reasoning and self-reliance in a way that being driven everywhere simply cannot. Your brain was being sculpted by independence every single morning before you even sat down in class. Now, let's talk about what happened when you got hurt. Because in the 60s, you did get hurt. You fell off your banana seat bike, you scraped your knees climbing trees, or you used a chemistry set that would be illegal today. When you came home with a bump or a bruise, your parents usually said something that might sound cold by today's standards. You're fine, go back outside. They had faith that you could handle discomfort. They believed that protecting you from every scrape would do more harm than the small injury itself. This created a generation that doesn't catastrophize physical pain. You understand that being hurt and being damaged are two very different things. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation. Small doses of difficulty as a child build up your psychological immunity for adulthood. The risks weren't just physical either. Think about sitting in the driveway while your dad worked on the car. He might hand you a wrench and show you exactly how the engine worked. Or maybe you were at the sewing machine with your mother, the needle moving fast near your fingers. Children in the 1960s were trusted with real tools and real consequences. Even toys like the Easy Bake Oven were real appliances that got hot enough to actually bake. You could get hurt, and that was the point. Learning to be careful was part of your education. This created adults who aren't intimidated by complexity. You assume you can figure out how things work. You grew up taking things apart and putting them back together, and that gave you a deep sense of competence. Let's talk about waiting. Real, long-term waiting. This is a skill the modern world has almost completely forgotten. If you wanted to see a movie, you waited for it to come to the one theater downtown. If you missed it, it was gone. If you wanted to hear your favorite song, you sat by the radio for hours, finger on the record button, praying the DJ wouldn't talk over the intro. If your favorite show ended on a cliffhanger, you had to wait an entire week to see what happened. There was no binge watching. This rhythm rewired your brain. You developed a high tolerance for delay. You know in your bones that good things are worth the wait. And that anticipation is its own kind of pleasure. In a world of instant gratification, your patience is a superpower. You don't panic when things take time, because you know that the spaces in between are where life happens. Picture a summer evening in 1965. The streetlights have just flickered on. which means you have 10 minutes to get home. You're in a backyard with a group of neighborhood kids, finishing a game you invented yourselves. No adults are watching. No one is refereeing. When an argument breaks out, you have to settle it. When someone's feelings get hurt, you figure out how to keep the game going. This daily practice in human relations created people who can read a room instantly. You sense tension before it even surfaces. You became a student of human behavior. Not from a book, but because your social life depended on it. You learned who to trust and how to be part of a group without losing yourself. These skills produced adults with incredibly high social intelligence, the kind that allows you to navigate complex dynamics with total ease. Then, there were the moments that changed your sense of what was possible. July 20th, 1969. You're watching grainy footage of a man in a white suit stepping onto the moon. You were watching the boundary of human possibility expand in real time. Everything you were told was impossible was happening right in front of you. This moment imprinted a visceral belief that the phrase, "it can't be done," is usually just a failure of imagination. But that optimism lived alongside the nightly news from a distance. You saw the reality of world conflicts while you were eating dinner. This exposure didn't just bother you, it educated you. You learned that the world can be a difficult place and that authority isn't always right. This created a generation that respects competence over titles. You follow leaders who earn your trust, not just those who demand it. You learned that questioning the status quo isn't disrespectful. Sometimes it's necessary. And yet, despite the drills and the loss of heroes, there is something defiant about your optimism. You saw the world change because people refused to give up. You hold two truths at once. The world can have its dark moments, and the world can get better. You don't need a trophy for participating, because you know that failure is where the real lessons are. You are the living proof that resilience is built through experience, not protection. You grew up in a decade that was a little dangerous and a lot free. And because you learned to navigate that world, you have the strength to weather any storm today. That is the hidden psychology of the 1960s, and it's a strength we could all learn from. What is the most important lesson you learned from your childhood in the 60s? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing